The purpose of this lesson is to learn how to install MySQL on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS X, the MySQL directory structure, and post-installation requirements. The first step in installing MySQL is to download it. I am using Windows for this example, so I'm going to open up Internet Explorer or whatever web browser I have installed and go to www.mysql.com. Once you are there at their page, you go to Downloads, scroll to the bottom, and I want MySQL Community Edition. There are other commercial editions available, but I want the Community Edition. This is the free one. And I want Community Server. The next page will bring up a list of different platforms that are available, and there's a drop-down box here where I can select which platform I'm using, but it should automatically detect your platform and allow you to install it. There is a pre-configured installer for Windows that includes all of the MySQL products in one package. It makes it real easy to install on Windows. So I'm going to select this one. I want to use the 32-bit platform, and I have the option of using a web installer or to download the full installer package. I'm going to select the full installer package and download it. Now on the next page, it's going to prompt me to either log in or sign up for an account. I don't necessarily need to do that because there's a link down here that says no thanks, just start my download. So I'm going to start the download. I'm going to save it, and then once I save it, then I can run it. Now for this example, I've already downloaded the MySQL installer. It is located under my downloads folder. One thing to be aware of is that your computer has to have Microsoft.NET Framework 4.0 or higher installed for this installer to work. If you get an error, you need to go online and download that separately. So I'm going to run this. It's going to prompt me for the UAC. You may encounter several prompts for the UAC. You need to accept each of those. It does provide a GNU license. If you choose to read through it, please do so, but you have to accept it. Next. I am actually going to select the developer default. Now this installs all of the products that I need to be able to have the server, have the client tools, have the Workbench. It is all included in this package. So next. And so it is going to go through and check requirements to see if everything that I need for the computer is already installed. So when I actually go through this, it will tell me that some of these are not met, and then I have to let my computer do the updates that are required. Some of these we would need to have, so things like Excel would already have to be on the computer. I'm not going to be using any of the connectors for Excel for these lessons, so I can ignore those. The Visual Studio, if I wanted to integrate this directly into my Visual Studio applications, I would have to have that installed. So I'm okay with the stuff that I have installed because I'm not going to use the other options that are in MySQL for these lessons. Now, after a couple of minutes after letting it check to see if those are installed, you will be presented with a screen to install some of the prerequisites. So I'm going to accept the license terms, go ahead and install it. This will take just a couple of minutes to install. And MySQL behind the scenes is getting everything prepared that I need to be able to use MySQL on a Windows computer. So the installation is complete. It will go through the others and check to see if prerequisites for those are met. And if not, once again, it will do the same thing and it will prompt me to install the items that I need on the computer. Okay, so now it's gone through everything that I need. Next. Okay, now it's telling me that it's failing, but it's failing because of the things for Excel, which I don't really need, so I'm going to tell it OK. Alright, so now these are all of the items that it is going to install, so I'm going to click Execute. It go through the installation, and as it goes through the install, it shows you which stage it's on and its current percentage here for the progress. This section takes just a minute. So now it is completed. It has gone through and installed everything. And one thing you'll notice is the very last thing is that it installed some sample databases. And we will actually use those for some of the lessons to learn how to actually interact with the database. Next. It shows everything that's ready to configure. Now notice the MySQL server has not actually been configured yet. The installation files are there, but it's not actually set up to run. So next. Okay, so now it wants to know what kind of machine do we have. Well, this is a development machine. We will be allowing it to use TCP. Now the named pipe, what this is going to be is something to allow other devices to talk to my computer, not necessarily by using the TCP/IP protocols, but instead by using something like a NetBIOS name or other connections that I can have by shared memory. So if I have applications and I don't necessarily want them going through the network stack, I have that option. For these examples, we're just going to leave it as the defaults. Okay, the next step is you have to choose a MySQL root password. Now the root account is your super administrator account. It's the one that has full rights to the system, and it can do whatever you want to the system. Now for a test machine, we usually just set the password to MySQL. It shows you that it's a weak password, but once again, like I said, this is just a test machine. If we're a full production environment machine, I would want a password with at least 16 characters in length. I would want it to be a very secure password. And so I can also create user accounts here. Now we will play with these more later. We will actually use the Workbench to create user accounts so you can see how security and roles function. It will configure MySQL as a Windows service, which means that the MySQL server will run in the background as a service as soon as you turn the computer on. You can allow it to run as a standard system account, or you can set up a custom user. So if you have a machine that's locked down and you need a particular administrator to be the user that runs that account, you could put it under the context of the user. I'm just going to click Next. All right, so now I've configured everything. It is actually going to write out some initialization files and some configuration files. So I'm going to execute this, and it will go through and write all of those files out. And then finish. Okay, so now the product is configured. It's going to walk us through for the samples. Next. It wants to know where is the server. Now the server is running on this machine. It wants to know the user and the password, which the password is the one that I created during this installation. I can check it to verify that we can connect to the server. Next. And then what it will do is it will import the sample database tables and user accounts and things of that nature for us to use for educational purposes. Next. And then we are done. If you want, you can copy the installation procedure to the clipboard. So if you want to see all of the steps that occurred, all of the outcome, you can copy that to the clipboard, look at it in Notepad. I'm just simply going to allow it to start MySQL Workbench. And the installation is now completed. This is the MySQL Workbench. We will get more into how to use this in future lessons. The purpose of this lesson was just simply to learn how to install it. So that is all you need to do to install it on Windows. Make sure that you get the actual Windows full installer package. For the next installation, we will actually be using Ubuntu Linux. There are way too many distributions of Linux to discuss all of them, so I am going to use Ubuntu, and I will show you where to locate it for other installations. So for other installations, you have to actually go to the MySQL website, and from there you can download your installer just like you did with Windows. So it's mysql.com, downloads, scroll to the bottom, and I want the Community Edition. I want Community Server. And then when I come to the bottom here, it will automatically prompt me for Linux. Like I said, it does detect your platform from the browser settings. Now, if you notice here, it automatically brings up Linux generic. I would have to figure out which one of these that I want to use. It just depends on the platform, but I can select things like Red Hat Server if I'm using SUSE Linux, Debian, any of those I can select. Now with Ubuntu, it's really easy because all I have to do is to go to the Software Center. I can search for MySQL, and I get some options for MySQL. Now, there are two pieces for any MySQL installation. There is the server, which is just strictly the server portion. It has no client tools, has a couple of command line utilities for being able to maintain the services and maintain some of the actual background tasks for MySQL. And then there's the client. And I have a choice for the client if I want to use just a standard client or if I want to use Workbench. We are going to use Workbench, but before we can install that, we have to install MySQL Server. Now, if I look at more info, it will state that this is an empty package that depends on the current best version of MySQL Server. So what they've done is they've just simply put a dummy package out there that will automatically download the real package that it needs. So if you have a smartphone and you're familiar with installing apps on there, it works the same way in Ubuntu. I'm going to click Install, and I will get a status bar here that will show us the status of installing this. I do have to type in my password. So I authenticate, and it is downloading it. When it is done downloading it, then it will go through and install it. This takes just a couple of minutes. Once the package has been installed, you will notice that it now says installed here. It has the date and has the option to remove it, so you can actually uninstall it from the same location. So now I need the other piece. I need the Workbench. Workbench is here. So I'm going to click Install. And the same thing, I get my status bar where I just simply have to wait for it to finish the installation. Once the installation is complete, you will notice I now have a new icon on my launcher, and I can simply run the Workbench from here. Now, there are two installed instances here. This is simply because I've had MySQL installed before. By default, you only get this local instance. And once again, the purpose of this video is not to show you how to use Workbench. We will do that in future lessons. Make sure, if it is Ubuntu, though, that you use the Software Center because it is pre-configured for the optimal packages for Ubuntu. If you're using another platform, you will have to manually install those. Now, if you get stuck doing an installation and you need to know how to install it, you can always do a Google search and install MySQL in whatever version of Linux you have. And they actually do have help manuals that you can go and download, and it will walk you through how to install MySQL on whichever platform you are using. The last platform that we will discuss for installing MySQL is going to be Mac OS. This is OS 10 version 10.9.5. It will work similar in other versions. Now, I would expect that if I go to the App Store, I should be able to find it because I could do that in Ubuntu. However, on the Mac, they do not have a package in the App Store. So I still have to go to the website, Downloads, Community Download, and then Community Server. And when I scroll down, once again, it recognizes that I'm on Mac OS 10. And I have options of using a compressed tar archive or a disk image. So I selected to download the disk image, which I have actually already downloaded. And it is sitting here on my desktop. So to install it, I'm going to simply double click on it. And now it has mounted it. So I can open it up. I have the option of opening the package, and it will actually walk me through an installer. So continue, read through the license, continue. It says you must agree, so I'm going to agree to it. It tells me that it will take 695 megabytes of space on the computer. I can change the install location For the purpose of this installation, I'm just going to select the defaults, so install. And just like the other platforms, this will take a couple of minutes for it to actually perform the installation. Alright, so now our installer is finished. I can close out, and it is now an installed application on our computer. So now we have the server portion installed, but we still don't have any way to actually interface with the database. So we still need to install the Workbench. So we're going to go back to the MySQL website, go to Downloads, and this time we still need to go to Community Edition, but we're not going to do the server this time. We need to download Workbench. Okay, so when you go to Workbench, it will give you the option of a disk image. We're going to download it, and then we can install it on the computer. So I've already downloaded it. Now it's a matter of installing it. It's the same way as we did the installation for the server portion. Double click on it, allow it to extract it. Okay, so now this one is an application, so we're just simply going to drag MySQL over to Applications. And now it's installed. So to run the application, I'm going to go to the Applications folder. I now have MySQL Workbench in here. The first time that I run it, it will tell me that it's an application downloaded from the internet, so do I want to open it? I want to open it. And it will take just a couple of minutes for it to actually open the application the first time. Now that the Workbench is launched, we need to create a connection. So I'm going to click the little plus sign here. And I'm going to give it a name, so I'm just going to call it local. All of the rest of this just stays the same. It's the local host, the username is root, and I'm going to test my connection. It should say that it successfully made a connection. Click OK. OK, and now we have it stored. One thing to note is that the very first time that you use it, there's a possibility it may not actually run. It may say that there's no connection. If that's the case, MySQL may not be started. And the easiest way to start it is just to simply restart the computer, because it is actually set to automatically start up with the computer. So if you get an error message that says there's no connection, just simply restart your computer. Now, like I said, the purpose of this lesson is not to teach you how to use the Workbench. We will do that in future lessons. But for right now, I just want to show to you one thing. To actually connect to the database server, I'm going to double click on it. It will open up the SQL editor. And what I want to do here is I want to create a new database. You don't need to worry about the syntax right now. I just want to show you that it will actually create the database. So I'm going to create a database, and I'm going to call it Brian. That's my first name. And I'm going to run this. This is called a query, which will result in some sort of output. And what I actually just did is, behind the scenes, I told MySQL to create a brand new database, call it Brian, and if I come over here and refresh, we will actually see that database show up over here. And so what that means is it inserted a record into our master database that is responsible for keeping track of what all database tables we have. All right, so what I want to show to you is where that file actually just got created. So I'm going to go to a folder, and it's located under the user folder. And then inside of here we have local, MySQL, and then there are some folders in here that we need to know. Our binary files are located under the bin folder. These are things that are our scripts and our different programs that run. But the one in particular that I really want to pay attention to for now is going to be this one called data. And inside of here, you'll notice that there is a folder called Brian. And what it does is it will create a new folder for each database that we create. Now, if you notice, I have a little sign here, and I actually do not have permission to open this folder. And I can't take permissions for that folder without doing some extra steps. And the reason for it is that MySQL locks down that folder because remember from our previous lesson, the DBMS is the only thing that is really allowed to talk to the database folder. So the actual files sitting on the hard drive, I don't have any access to. Only the DBMS actually has access to those files. Now the Mac and Linux, Unix, BSD, they're all going to be about the same for the folder structure. Windows is a little bit different, so I want to show this to you. I am going to create a new new database, and I'm going to call it Brian again, just to be consistent with the other one. And if I refresh over here, I will see that that database exists. Okay, so now what it has actually done is it created a folder, and it's not under program files, it's actually under the C drive under program data. And there's a MySQL folder here, and it has the server 5.6, and there's a data folder here. And if you notice, I now have a folder called Brian because that's where my database is actually located. Here is Sequila and Test and World, which if you notice over here, those also exist as databases within our server. So on Windows, it is located under program data. On the Mac and Unix, it's located under the user /local folder. So just as a recap for installing MySQL, first thing is you go to mysql.com, go to downloads, you want the MySQL Community Server Edition, you select the correct installer for your platform, and then it'll ask you if you want to use the server or the Workbench, and make sure that if you're on a Unix or Mac, you get both of those. And you can either log in or you can just simply click the link at the bottom that says no thanks, just start my download. So after the installation, there's a little bit of stuff that you have to do. On Windows, you need to set a root password, which will actually prompt you during the installation, and then you have to use that root password to log in. On Linux, you also have to set a root password. However, it does not necessarily prompt you depending on the distribution that you're using. You may have to set permissions on the MySQL folders, especially if you use the packages directly from the MySQL website. And once again, refer to those the Linux manuals that are available online. On the Mac, you need to start the MySQL service if it's not running, and the easiest way to do that is to reboot. And then once you log into the Workbench, you have to create that local connection. In this lesson, you learned how to install MySQL on Windows, Linux, and on Mac OS X. You learned about the MySQL directory structure, especially where the database files are located, and then some post-installation requirements that you have for each of the platforms.